So good morning, everyone. So this morning I'll be giving a talk on the teachings of our Guru, Paramahansa Yogananda, and the subject is, do we live one or many lives? So let's begin by standing for the opening prayer. Heavenly Father, Mother, Friend, Beloved God, Jesus Christ, Bhagavan Krishna, Mahavatar Babaji, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, and our Guru, Paramahansa Yogananda, saints of all religions, we bow to you all. Beloved Lord, I am your child, and above everything else, I long to know you. I long to become one with you. Show me the way through meditation and divine love that leads to thee. Om. Peace. Amen. Please be seated. So our Guru Paramahansa Yogananda says, the soul, being immortal, outlives the body. But this immortal soul, while in the physical body, puts on the mask of the ego and its imperfections. The soul cannot go back to spirit until it has removed these delusive imperfections. If they cannot be done away with in one life, the soul must reincarnate in order to conquer them. And so I'll talk today about reincarnation and do we live one life, do we live many lives, and how do we get out of this cycle of reincarnation. In another place, our Guru says, desires for worldly joys create the magnetic attraction that draws man back to earth, life after life. And we always begin our services with a period of meditation, because meditation is the best way to create a different magnetic attraction than the desire for worldly joys. In meditation, if we can get still enough and calm enough, we can feel a love and a joy. And once we taste it, it has a magnetic attraction, and we start wanting that more than we want the desires of a worldly life. So let's do some devotional chanting and we'll meditate. So let's sit up straight and bring the shoulders back and the chest out, and then relax. And throughout the meditation, try to keep the spine straight and the body completely relaxed, the eyes turned upwards. And let's tense and relax a few times to release any tension in the body. So inhale, tense the whole body, completely relax. And once more, tense, relax. And now check the body to make sure you're completely relaxed. It's almost as if your body has turned to jelly, and yet the spine is remaining very straight. And we'll chant, I am the bubble, make me the sea. And one of the things we're affirming in this chant is we think we're the bubble of this little immortal being and this human, and we're asking Spirit to make us the sea, make us aware that we're actually the ocean of life. We're not just the little bubble of this one incarnation. So do thou, my Lord, so do thou, my Lord, Thou and I never apart. Thou and I never apart. Wave of the sea, dissolve in the sea. Wave of the sea, dissolve in the sea. I am the bubble, make me the sea. I am the bubble, make me the sea. Make me the sea, oh make me the sea. Make me the sea, oh make me the sea. I am the bubble, make me the sea. I am the bubble, make me the sea. So do thou, my Lord, so do thou, my Lord. Thou and I never apart. Thou and I never apart. Wave of the sea, dissolve in the sea. Wave of the sea, dissolve in the sea. I am the bubble, make me the sea. I am the bubble, make me the sea. Make me the sea, oh make me the sea. Make me the sea, oh make me the sea. I am the bubble, make me the sea. I am the bubble, make me the sea. So do thou, my Lord, so do thou, my Lord. Thou and I never apart. Thou and I never apart. Wave of the sea, dissolve in the sea. Wave of the sea, dissolve in the sea. I am the bubble, make me 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 the sea. And let's continue chanting for a moment. I am the bubble, make me the sea. Now we'll do a simple breathing exercise that will help us to calm the mind and the heart before we go into meditation. So we'll inhale, hold the breath for an equal count, and then exhale for the same count. So let's inhale. Hold the breath. Exhale. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. And once more, inhale. Hold. And exhale. And now take a deep inhalation and relax. And now just breathe naturally. Put all your attention on the deep peace. Be perfectly still, physically and mentally, no thoughts, but be deeply attentive to the peace that is your own being. So the subject this morning is, do we live one life or many lives? And the answer is yes, we do. As the soul, we came out of spirit one day, many eons ago. We go through these experiences in many different human forms. Someday we'll merge back into spirit. So as the soul, we only live one life. And we just go through all these different experiences, but really there's just one life. And we take on many forms as the soul, many human forms. We come on earth many times in many different human bodies to learn lessons and to finally come to the realization that we're not going to find happiness by fulfilling our physical desires, that we have to cultivate desires and have the experience of some higher and finer joys than the things that we can experience through the senses. And eventually we'll realize that we are that soul that only has one life. So I'll talk today about how and why reincarnation works, so we can understand how to become free of these forced and very uncomfortable human incarnations. And the way out: yoga, meditation, and love. I mean, I probably sound like a broken record to some people, but that really is the core of our path, is scientific meditation plus divine love. Yoga meditation includes right behavior, the yamas and niyamas, and living rightly. We usually don't focus too much on reincarnation here. A person could practice our teachings and not even believe in reincarnation. They would still get the same results. And I think some people, maybe especially when they first come on the path, they think a lot of reincarnation. Who was I? And why don't I remember? And I'll talk about some of that. But it is good to know about the more subtle aspects of reincarnation, why it happens, because it's really linked to why meditation is so effective, because it helps to work with these subtle laws that keep us coming back in different human experiences. There's incredible stories of people who've remembered previous incarnations. Usually people don't remember. I'm not going to share any of these. You can find them online. But there's some really amazing stories of children who all of a sudden start coming up with details of a lifetime hundreds, thousands of miles away. And they remember, details about their family, their parents, and when they're investigated, all these things end up being true. So just as we wear different clothes when we're at home, when I woke up this morning, I was dressed a certain way. I changed to some different clothes to drive to the temple. Now I'm wearing robes. After the service, I'm going to have lunch. I'll go running, maybe. I'll be wearing totally different clothes. It's still me. It's not like I'm having different incarnations. And in the same way, the soul, it puts on all these different garbs, different costumes of, male, female, different races. It's still the soul, and that's the core of who we are. So again, in that sense, we only have one lifetime as the soul. So the purpose of the science of yoga and yoga meditation is to shift our identity from this limited mortal form, this human incarnation, to the spirit, the pure consciousness, the being that we are. And I'll talk more about that, how meditation actually does that and helps us to overcome these desires. Now, what reincarnates? How do we stop the cycle of reincarnation? Do we want to stop it? Some people might think, this isn't so bad. It's not so good either, especially not compared to what we could be experiencing. And different parts of the world, it's definitely not so good. We've been blessed to be born and live in a very prosperous, relatively country with peace. It's not always like this. And, we do want to get out. I saw a Frank and Ernest cartoon. And Frank asked Ernest, "Do you think you've had previous lives?" And Ernest says, "I hope so. I'd hate to think I got this far behind in just one lifetime." And it works both ways. Some people, they've gotten really far ahead. And it can't happen in just one lifetime. You read about these children who are like savants with music or science. I've met children who are incredible meditators, and they couldn't possibly have gotten that far ahead in one lifetime. So it works both ways. Some people got ahead, some people got behind, and it took a number of lifetimes. So how did we get into this mess? How did we get so far behind? In one place in our Guru's commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, Paramahansa Yogananda says that we, the soul, came out of spirit. There was a moment where spirit projected us. It was like gave birth to us. And at first, it was all good. The soul had interactions with the creation and was able to experience things from a very neutral perspective and wasn't affected by these interactions. But then certain interactions with the creation felt really good, and other reactions or other interactions didn't feel so good. And so the soul started liking and wanting more of certain experiences, and it wanted to avoid certain other experiences. And then desires started forming. And our Guru says that reincarnation is about desires. And so the soul has these interactions with the world, and instead of being very neutral, it starts wanting more of certain ones and wanting to avoid uncomfortable experiences. And especially on the physical plane, we all know how there's certain experiences here that feel really good, and there's certain other experiences that feel really bad. And we start building desires around this, and that's what keeps us coming back to this mortal incarnation. Eventually we go out of our way to have more of the experiences we like and fewer of the experiences we don't like. And some of these desires that we form can only be fulfilled on the physical plane by incarnating in a physical body. So we have a desire, we're not in a physical form, and the only way to fulfill that desire is to come to this plane and take on a human incarnation. So it's these desires that keep bringing us back to these human incarnations. So if the soul is perfect, then how do those desires stay with the soul? You would think, well, if the soul's perfect, when it leaves this body, why isn't it just free? How do the desires cling to the soul? Our Guru says, unfulfilled desires remain in the heart. And what is the harm in harboring them? It is this: every desire consists of specific forces, either good or evil, or a mixture of both. And when you die, though your body is gone, those forces do not die. As mental tabloids, they follow your soul wherever it goes. And when you are reborn, these tabloids manifest as behavioral tendencies. Thus, a person who has died an alcoholic brings with him the tendency to alcoholism when he is reborn, and it remains with him until he overcomes desire for alcohol. And you could say this about any tendency or habit. We all probably came into this life with certain habits and tendencies that it wasn't just from our DNA or from our environment. Especially in certain people, you see so strongly that they have tendencies for good or bad that couldn't have come just from the way that they were raised. It's because of these mental tabloids, as our Guru describes them, that stay with the soul even after the body dies. In the yoga science, these are called samskaras. And in our Guru's commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, he defines samskaras like this: a thought or physical act once performed does not cease to be, but remains in the consciousness in a more subtle or melted form as an impression of that gross expression of thought or action. These impressions are called samskaras. They create inner urges, tendencies, or propensities that influence the intelligence to repeat those thoughts and actions. And then these become habits. And again, when we were created by spirit, we didn't have any of these tendencies. We just had we were free. And Sri Dayamata, a great disciple of our Guru, she shared one time a thought that she had about that moment when we were created as a soul. And she said she realized that there was a moment where Spirit was giving its 100% attention to her as she was being created as a soul. And she shared this with such a wonder and a delight in thinking that, when I first came out of Spirit, the Creator had its 100% loving attention on me. Just like when a mother gives birth to a baby, the mother has her attention on the baby and is loving it. And in the same way, we were just so loved by the Creator in that moment when we were created as a soul. Let's close our eyes for a moment and let's just visualize that moment when we came out of Spirit. Not this human being, but the soul. And the Creator was giving its 100% loving attention to us. Okay. One of the things I loved when I first heard her share that was that the way that you could just take a simple spiritual fact, we came out of Spirit. Yeah, that's this spiritual fact. And she could turn it into this devotional kind of wonder-filled moment and feel in that moment how we were very much loved by the Creator when we were created. So again, the problem is that after we were created, we started getting entangled in these good and bad experiences and wanting more of some and less of others. And people who seem born with innate talents and good skills, they have good samskaras. There are good mental tabloids that we come with. We all have some of those. Someone who seems to have an innate tendency to automatically do bad actions, to hurt people, they have these other kinds of samskaras. We hear this term old soul, and I've heard people say, this person is an old soul. I think an old soul is one that's been through this process of reincarnating so many times that they're just sick of it. And even though on a conscious level they don't know it, in their core they know that, okay, something's wrong with this picture. The way it's set up is not right, and I really want to get out of this. And I think that, crying for freedom, for a way out, is like this prayer from the soul that gets answered by coming across a teaching like this, that does show us the way to freedom. So having previous lives, it does explain how we come into this life with a mixture of good and bad habits and strengths. It works with spiritual development too. And for some years I was involved in our boys' youth program, and it was a summer camp where we would get about 140 boys for a whole week up in the mountains. And it was 10-year-old to 17-year-old. And you had a whole mixture of kids, and some were like angels. They just somehow took to the meditation and the routine very quickly. Others, maybe not so much. And most of them had a little bit of both, where they could just be like an angel one moment and like a little devil the next moment. And you could see that they had these tendencies. And with some of them, you really weren't sure when they got older which way they were going to go, which tendencies were they going to feed, in which we're going to become stronger. And I remember there was this one camper. He was there for the first time. He was 10 years old. That's the first, age that they were eligible to come to camp. And he took to it like a fish to water. We would meditate morning, evening. They would attend classes on spiritual subjects, chanting, energization exercises. And he just loved it. He fit right in. And I knew his grandfather from having worked with one of the meditation groups. And then after the camp, some of us went to a kirtan, and the grandfather brought his grandson to it. And so this 10-year-old, he was happy sitting there, chanting to God with a couple hundred other people. And I thought, okay, what was I doing when I was 10 years old? I wasn't, in a mountain ashram for a week learning advanced yoga meditation techniques from ancient India and chanting and attending spiritual classes and having fun, because they would do fun camp activities too. And then going to a kirtan and chanting for 2 hours with a couple hundred people. When I was 10, I think my big accomplishment was that I'd memorized the starting lineup of the Chicago Cubs baseball team. And I don't know that I had much more going on when I was 10. But I have some good news. Where do we all stand on this spectrum of, having good tendencies and bad tendencies? And I think it's better than you give yourself credit for. In a talk that our guru gave, he said, all of you have something of that divine type in you. Otherwise, you would not be here this morning. And I think that still holds true. We get caught up in our lives and we see the struggle and the bad habits. The fact that you're even here and drawn to teachings like this, you have some really good tendencies, and it's just a matter of making them stronger and then working to overcome the tendencies that pull us down. Now, if it's true that we live many lives, many incarnations, why do we usually not remember our past lives? Some people do, but most people don't. And you think, well, wouldn't I learn faster, if I remembered all my mistakes? And it's actually good news that we don't remember, because I think in most cases we don't want to know. And our guru, he does talk about why it is that we don't remember. And he says the pure consciousness of the soul maintains a continuity of awareness. And so the soul remembers all these incarnations. And very advanced beings, they do have recollection of their previous lifetimes. But our guru says that memory after death, it can't survive under certain conditions. And we fulfill those conditions for the most part. He says one of the conditions, he says if there's attachment to the body, we're not going to remember our past incarnations. He says if there is attachment for past possessions, family, or friends, we're not going to remember our past incarnations. Now, why would this be? Our guru says that if the new soul, the newborn soul in a human incarnation, remembered all its previous moms and dads and spouses and best friends, imagine the frustration. It wouldn't be with all those friends anymore. And it would be very limiting to be with the same people, incarnation after incarnation. One of the lessons we're meant to learn here is to expand our love. And we learn to love purely in our human relationships with the idea that eventually we'll expand that love to include love for eventually all beings. And if we were just always locked into the same, as our guru says, us four and no more, the same people, life after life, we wouldn't learn to expand that love. That said, we do have certain good friends that we've developed a really deep friendship in past lives. Sometimes we meet someone and it's like we already know that person. We've been with certain people, and it is good to develop and cultivate those friendships because we've already worked through some of the difficulties in friendships. Our guru says the soul is a brother to all mankind. Imagine how narrow it would become if it only loved one small circle of human beings. It would not expand. One of the other things is that imagine if you could remember your past incarnations and who you were married to and your mom and dad. Imagine how confusing it would be. You'd come into a family and all of a sudden you'd meet your mom and dad from before. It's like, who's my mom and dad? And say you get married and then all of a sudden you start meeting your previous spouses from all your previous lifetimes. It would just be too confusing. And we have these relations in this life to focus on them and cultivate love in those incarnations. And then there's another reason, and I think this is a really big one that our guru says we don't remember. He says, if there is a strong entanglement in bad karma, and if one has not risen above the effects of both good and bad actions, then we won't remember the details of past incarnations. Imagine the lifetimes we've struggled. Most of our lifetimes haven't been these glamorous experiences where, we've been like a prince or, some famous person. There have been struggles, and we've struggled with habits. We've had pain. Imagine being born in this life and remembering all the pain of past incarnations, or remembering a bad habit that we struggled with for the previous many incarnations and didn't overcome. We come into this life and we remember all that. I mean, imagine how discouraged we would be. And so we get a fresh start, and we don't remember all those things, so that we come in with a fresh enthusiasm to work on these struggles. Our guru says the soul would be extremely discouraged, remembering past bad karma, struggles, and suffering, and wouldn't have the will to make new effort to progress. It would forget its transcendent nature. At the conclusion of each lifetime, death washes away all dark impressions, so that the soul can begin afresh to express itself in newer ways and make newer efforts. So we get a fresh start, and we start with a clean slate. So again, as our guru says, reincarnation is about desires. Desires remain in our heart as these samskaras, and it's not in our physical heart, but in our astral body, this energy system of the chakras in the spine. That's where these samskaras and impressions reside. And when the physical body dies, those impressions remain. So how do we break this bond? I mean, how do we overcome quickly rather than lifetime after lifetime overcoming these impressions and these mental tabloids that are remaining with the soul from one lifetime to another? Everything we talk about here at the temple, everything in our guru's teachings is really about this. How do we overcome these limitations? How do we shift from being this mortal form, this human, to realizing that we're the soul? And the two most effective ways are the things that I think are mentioned most often here: yoga meditation plus divine love. And meditation plus devotion, our guru told one disciple, Kriya Yoga plus devotion works like mathematics, it cannot fail. And I want to talk about how meditation and love, either one can free us. Working together, they're very effective, and especially in the context of what I've talked about with how reincarnation works and these tabloids that follow us around. When we practice meditation, whatever method, whatever technique we're practicing, the attention goes within, the life force withdraws from the extremities of the body and starts retreating into these centers of consciousness in the spine. And eventually it goes up to these higher centers of consciousness in the heart and in the brain. And when we bring that life force, that light, into the heart and into the brain, it helps to eradicate those tendencies that are residing there. And the light has this incredible power to sometimes even just burn away these bad habits of incarnations. I mean, I've heard many stories of people who've meditated and in one divine experience of the light coming into them had habits, tendencies eradicated that had been with them for a lifetime and probably for many lifetimes. Another reason that meditation works so well is that we get a taste of the peace. During the meditation we had just now, maybe you felt a glimmer of the peace that really is your own being, is your own soul. Meditation reawakens this awareness of higher and finer joys, higher and finer love, and we want that more. And we want to experience that more. And so we start doing more of the actions, meditation, living rightly, that will lead to that, and we start doing less of the actions that bring our consciousness down. So meditation, our Guru says, it awakens the desire for God. It awakens the desire for more of that joy, and we want it more and more. It's a matter of degrees. A very deep meditation may free us temporarily from these desires and these habits. We go back into our normal life. Maybe they don't bother us as much if we don't reinforce them. And then over time, those tendencies start getting washed away by repeated efforts at meditation, repeatedly bringing that light into the spine and brain. So again, reincarnation is about desires, and meditation is very good at eliminating those desires where they reside in our core. And this is why Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita says, even a little bit of the practice of this religion frees us from dire fears and colossal sufferings. In the Bible, Jesus says, except a man be born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. So what is Jesus talking about here when he says, unless we're born again, we can't see the kingdom of God? Our Guru says, Jesus said that we must reestablish our connection with eternity. We must be born again. Man has either to follow the circuitous route of reincarnations to work out his karma, or by a technique such as Kriya Yoga and the help of a true Guru, to awaken the divine faculty of intuition and know himself as a soul, that is, be born again in spirit. So a technique like Kriya Yoga can free us, along with the help of a true Guru, and also the grace of God. And I'll talk about that in a bit. Now, what about love? How does love for God and love for others, pure love, how does that free us from the desires that lead us to endless births? Well, where do we experience love? We experience it in the heart. And where do those desires reside? Our Guru says they reside in the heart. And pure love purifies the heart of those desires. In one of his prayers, our Guru says, may my heart daily become more pure by all surrendering love for thee. So when we love God, it purifies the heart of the desires. And that love, I don't know how it works, it dissolves them, it replaces those desires, but pure love, it purifies the heart. Love for God and love for others. Love also expands the consciousness. When we love, whether we love God or when we think and care so much about others that our love for them awakens, we're no longer just in this limited single human incarnations. Our consciousness has expanded from this little one mortal body to include other beings. And again, this is one way that, especially the love that we experience in our families and in serving others, can expand our consciousness and take us out of this limited one human incarnation. My favorite way that love frees us is that love brings joy. When we love, we can experience it as joy in the heart and in the consciousness. And to me, it's like a mathematical law. People who love, they have a happiness. When people, even when they're falling in love on a human level, they experience a certain kind of happiness. When we love purely, we experience a much deeper joy than we can imagine. And to me, that joy is God. And so when I love God, when I love others, I experience more joy, and that joy is God. And I want more of it. The more I experience it, the more I want it, and I start doing less of those actions that take me away from that joy, and I start doing more actions that help me to experience that joy. Meditation, living rightly, and so on. Another way that love can free us, love for God, it draws the attention of God and the masters. Past karma, it can be dissolved by the grace of God, by the blessing of God, by the blessing of a master. A few days ago was the commemoration service for the Mahasamadhi, or passing of Swami Sri Yukteswar, who was our guru's guru. And in his autobiography, our guru writes about an experience where after Sri Yukteswar had passed, he visited our guru in a body of light, and that body even had a physical form to it. And at the end of the experience, Sri Yukteswar told our guru many things about how the soul reincarnates and how to become free. And at the end of that experience, Sri Yukteswar blessed him. And our guru wrote, "My former incarnations appeared before my inward eye in motion picture-like sequence. Good and bad karma of the past was dissolved in the cosmic light shed around me by my master's divine visit." This is part of the mystery and the magic of practicing meditation, practicing devotion for God. We open ourselves to this divine grace, and it's not a science. It's not mathematics. We don't know exactly how it works. We do know that grace of God and that blessing is always there. There was one disciple, he went to Yogananda and asked Yogananda for his blessing. And Yogananda told him, my blessing is always there. He said, it's your blessing that's required. And so that blessing of God and the masters, it's always present. It's always here. That's the grace of God. And our part is to do the things that will make us receptive to it. And it's like a glass. I brought this drinking glass. When I hold it upside down, I could pour a pitcher of water forever over the glass and it would never hold any water. But if you turn it right side up, it can hold water, and I can quench my thirst. And in the same way, our part, through the practice of meditation, through love, we're turning that glass right side up so that we can receive that grace of God, the love of God that's always present, always wants to help us. Remember that moment as a soul when we were created, and we were especially loved in that moment. That love is always there. And again, we just have to turn the glass from being upside down to right side up so we can receive that love. I mentioned that at that moment, we had the full attention of the Creator and the full love. And there's a comedian who once said that, always remember that you're special, just like everybody else. But it's true. We are. And we were created as a divine being, and we just have to remember. And again, that's everything we talk about here is about that process of remembering who we really are. So do we live one life or many? We're the soul, so I think the ultimate answer is we just live one life. And we would put on different clothes, different garments from reincarnation to reincarnation, but we're really living just one life. And reincarnation is about desires, as our Guru says. And those desires, they carry over from one incarnation to another. They stay with the soul as mental tabloids, as samskaras. And meditation plus love is the fast way to roast those tabloids or those samskaras. So we don't have to work out every single desire. I mean, imagine if you had to work out every single desire of incarnations. by actually living through them, it would take forever. And people often ask, when they hear about these teachings, they realize that it takes some work to practice meditation and to live rightly. And so they ask, okay, but is there a shortcut? And it's like, well, this is the shortcut. And you're hearing it, and it does take some work, and it's not easy. I mentioned the 10-year-old boy who came with, obviously, some incredibly good karma and past tendencies. And most of us didn't. At least we didn't start out like that. I'm a runner, and in running, one of the things they always teach you is to finish your run strong, or to finish a race strong. So we may not have started out at 10 years old learning about these advanced meditation techniques. It's more important how we finish the race. And so no matter when you come on the spiritual path, everything that came before, it doesn't matter. I mean, that was the beginning of the race. We were just maybe learning how to move and how to run. It's more important how we finish the race. So let's all finish strong in this race. So let's close with these words of our Guru, very short and sweet. He says, live today well, and the next step will take care of itself. So let's meditate for just a moment. So put the attention at the Christ center. And ask for divine help in doing all these things that we've talked about today. Practice of meditation and cultivating divine love. So now let's spend a minute praying for others. And now let's have our closing prayer. Heavenly Father, Mother, friend, beloved God, beloved Gurus, all saints, we bow to you all. May thy love shine forever on the sanctuary of my devotion. And may I be able to awaken thy love in all hearts. Om. Peace. Amen.